The clock on my office wall read midnight. Midnight. The day had barely begun, and already I could feel the slow burn of betrayal crawling up my spine. My name is Alexander Ashford, and 3 weeks ago, I underwent surgery on my leg. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to confine me to a wheelchair for a month and force me to work from home. I had trusted my wife, Victoria, to manage things at Ashford Industries in my absence. We had been married for 5 years, a union born of strategic necessity but nurtured into something I had believed was genuine love. How foolish I was. My phone buzzed at midnight. It was a screenshot from my assistant, Marcus. He had been monitoring social media, as he always did, tracking mentions of the company and our family name. What he found made my blood run cold. The screenshot showed a post from our new intern, Julian Cross. Julian had joined Sterling Corporation, Victoria's family company, which had merged operations with mine years ago, barely 2 weeks earlier. Fresh out of university, no real experience, but he had somehow caught my wife's attention. The post featured a photograph of my executive suite, the corner office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, the one I had personally designed with Italian leather furniture, custom walnut shelving, and a wall displaying every award I had earned over 15 years of building Ashford Industries from nothing. The caption read, "Grateful for Victoria's trust and mentorship. I'll strive to live up to the expectation." But it was the photograph that truly enraged me. The office layout had been completely rearranged. My desk had been moved. My shelves had been stripped. And my awards, the trophies, the plaques, the commemorative crystal pieces that represented decades of blood, sweat, and sacrifice, were nowhere to be seen. In their place were Julian's cheap motivational posters and a potted plant that looked like it came from a grocery store. I forwarded the screenshot to Victoria immediately. My fingers trembled as I typed, "Victoria, what's the meaning of this? Why is an intern occupying my private office?" The response came not as a text, but as a voice message. I played it, and her voice came through slurred slightly, as if she had been drinking. "Darling, it's just an office. Besides, you're not using it right now." Just an office. She said it was just an office. I closed my eyes and counted to 3. Then I typed my response. I want that office restored to its original state within 10 minutes, exactly as it was. Every award. Every piece of furniture. Everything in its precise place. Victoria didn't respond. 2 minutes passed. Then 5. I watched the clock on my phone, each second stretching into eternity. At the 7-minute mark, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Marcus. "Suspend the Hawthorne contract. Immediately." Marcus hesitated. "Sir, that's Sterling Corporation's most vital agreement. The product launch is next week. If we suspend it now..." "I didn't ask for your opinion. I gave you an order." "Yes, sir." The Hawthorne contract was worth $200 million. It represented nearly 40% of Sterling Corporation's projected annual revenue. Victoria had spent 6 months negotiating it, and the product launch was scheduled for the following week. Halting it now would cause catastrophic damage. But I didn't care. If someone wanted to challenge my authority, I had no problem bankrupting Sterling Corporation entirely. Victoria's calls began hammering my phone within minutes. One after another, relentless. I let them ring. On the 5th attempt, I finally answered. Her voice blasted through the receiver, enraged in a way I had never heard before. "Alexander, have you lost your mind? That's a $200 million project. The product launch is next week. Halting it now is practically suicidal for the company. All of this over an office. Are you serious? 5 years of marriage. 5 years of building something together. And this was the first time she had ever raised her voice at me, and it was over another man. Not a business dispute. Not a family matter. A 22-year-old intern with a pretty face and a social media habit. I took a slow sip of whiskey, feeling the liquid burn down my throat. A chill spread through my chest, cooling the rage into something far more dangerous, resolve. This isn't about the office, Victoria, and you know it. Restore my office immediately. Everything back in its exact place, including every single one of my awards. Or the company will lose far more than $200 million. Silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow. "Now you have 5 minutes left," I said coldly. Then I hung up. I watched the clock. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with photographs. Victoria had sent images of the restored office. Everything was back in its original position. My desk. My shelves. My awards. I zoomed in on each photo, checking every detail. It was perfect. Upon receiving the photos, I immediately contacted Marcus and rescinded the suspension order. The Hawthorne contract was restored. The crisis, as far as the business was concerned, was averted. But I wasn't finished. I sent Victoria a different set of photographs. The first showed her study at our home, completely cleared out. Her desk, her books, her personal effects, all gone. The second showed her favorite antique, a Qing dynasty vase she had won at auction for nearly $1 million just last month. The third showed the floor littered with the shattered fragments of that same antique. I added a message: Victoria, consider this your punishment. You know my temper. Let this be the last time. She offered no response. I knew she was furious. I could almost see her standing in her empty study, staring at the broken pieces of her precious vase, tears of rage and disbelief streaming down her face. But my own anger burned hotter. She had crossed a line, and she needed to understand that some lines, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. Our marriage had begun as a strategic alliance. 5 years ago, Victoria Sterling needed the Ashford family's overseas distribution channels to expand her father's company beyond domestic borders. I needed Sterling Corporation's domestic manufacturing base to compete with foreign imports flooding our market. A marriage of convenience was the logical outcome. There was no whirlwind romance, no grand love story, only a rational choice for mutual benefit. Alexander, Victoria had said before the wedding, holding my hand in hers. Her gaze was steady and sincere, her voice soft but certain. We won't just support each other in business. After we're married, I will trust you. And I will respect you. I appreciate your frankness, Victoria, I had replied, smiling. I hope our partnership proves successful. Over 5 years, something unexpected happened. We went from strangers to familiar companions. From respect to reliance. Somewhere along the way, warmth and affection blossomed between us. We shared countless nights, leaning on each other after endless corporate dinners, venting about difficult partners and impossible deadlines. We traveled together. We laughed together. We built a life together. This year, we finally welcomed our son, Nicholas. He was the ultimate testament to our love, a living proof that our arrangement had become something real. Holding him in my arms for the first time, I believed our bond had become unbreakable. But now, Julian Cross had shattered everything. I didn't know what game Victoria was playing, but I intended to find out. And when I did, I would end it, one way or another. That night, Victoria didn't come home. I sat alone in our empty house, the silence pressing against my ears like water in the deep sea. I checked my phone every few minutes, half expecting a text, an apology, an explanation. Nothing came. I knew she was expressing her anger and dissatisfaction in the only way she could, by staying away. But what she didn't understand was that her absence only confirmed my suspicions. If there was nothing between her and Julian, why couldn't she come home and face me? Why couldn't she look me in the eye and tell me I was wrong? I barely slept. The leg injury throbbed, but the pain in my chest was far worse. Around 3 a.m, I pulled myself out of bed and limped to Nicholas's nursery. He was sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling, his face soft and innocent. He looked like Victoria around the eyes and nose, but his mouth was mine, a stubborn set to it even in sleep. I'm sorry, son, I whispered, brushing my fingers across his forehead. I'm sorry, your mother and I couldn't do better. The next morning, I made a decision. I removed the bandages from my leg, against the doctor's explicit orders, and dressed in my finest suit. Dark charcoal, Italian wool, a power tie of deep burgundy. If I was going to war, I would do it looking like a king. Marcus, I called, have the car ready. I'm going to the office. Sir, your leg is none of your concern. The car, 10 minutes. When I arrived at Ashford Industries headquarters, the staff looked surprised to see me. They quickly lowered their heads in greeting, murmuring respectful hellos. The young receptionist, Claire, asked with genuine concern, Mr. Ashford, aren't you still recovering from your injury? What brings you in today? Some matters require personal attention, I said, nodding slightly as I passed. I headed straight for the elevator, my legs screaming with every step. But I refused to show weakness. I refused to limp. I walked as I always walked, with purpose, with power, with the confidence of a man who had built an empire from nothing. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor, and that's when I heard it, laughter spilling from Victoria's office. Not the polite, professional laughter she used with clients. Not the warm, familiar laughter she shared with me at home. This was something else entirely. Light. Unrestrained. Almost giddy. Through the partially opened door, I saw Julian Cross sitting right beside her. Their chairs were so close there was barely any space between them. Victoria's eyes were crinkled with amusement, her head tilted toward him, her body language open and inviting. It was a stark contrast to the cool indifference she usually showed her secretaries. Normally, aside from me, Victoria never allowed anyone to linger in her office. She was a private person, guarded and careful about who she let into her space. But now she and Julian were sitting there like old friends, engaged in animated conversation, completely oblivious to the world around them. And then I saw what Julian was wearing. A high-end designer suit. Dark navy with subtle pinstripes. A style I had admired for months. One Victoria had mentioned wanting to gift me for my birthday. Not only was the suit incredibly expensive, upwards of $50,000, it was a limited edition. Only 5 existed globally. And now it was being worn by an intern who had been with the company for less than 3 weeks. I pushed the door open. The laughter died instantly. Victoria's smile froze on her face, her eyes widening slightly. Julian scrambled to his feet, adopting an expression of respectful concern. "Mr. Ashford," he said, his voice soft and deferential. "I heard you just had surgery. You should really be resting at home. What brings you to the company so suddenly?" I scoffed. "Who gave you permission to comment on my personal affairs?" His smile froze. His mouth hung open, lost for words. "Take off that suit. Immediately." The office atmosphere plummeted below freezing. Julian's eyes widened, his lips trembling in disbelief. He glanced at Victoria, his eyes pleading for help. I turned to Victoria as well. My gaze was glacial. "Explain. Why is my suit on him?" Victoria frowned, impatience flickering across her features. Because of the office incident yesterday, Julian was subjected to a lot of gossip from colleagues. I was just compensating him a little. "It's just a suit. I'll get you a better one later." Compensation. I laughed coldly. This suit might not mean much financially to us, but it's still a limited edition global haute couture piece. What status does he have? Is he worthy of wearing it? Besides, what happened yesterday was his own fault for not knowing his place. He brought it upon himself. I stepped closer to Victoria, lowering my voice. "Have you also forgotten your own status? Forgotten who I am? Who gave you permission to casually give away something that belongs to me?" Julian turned deathly pale. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ashford. I didn't know this suit was yours." "Now you know. So take it off. Immediately." But when I cut Julian off, still pressing the issue relentlessly, Victoria lost her temper. "Alexander, don't push it. We have a project meeting to get to. Stop making a scene." My heart sank. She had never raised her voice to me in the office before, not once in 5 years. Now she was breaking that rule for Julian Cross. Beside her, Julian visibly relaxed, seeing Victoria stand up for him. "Project?" I asked. "Which project is that?" "The Apex Corporation partnership. Julian and I are about to leave for the meeting." Victoria tugged at her sleeve, her tone growing even more impatient. "Julian has been a significant help with this matter. I'm bringing him along to the discussion." I raised an eyebrow, my smile laced with sarcasm. "Oh, I wasn't aware an intern possessed such capability, enough to influence the decisions of a publicly traded company." Victoria's face darkened. She grabbed her purse and motioned for Julian to follow. "Let's go. We can't afford to waste any more time." As they brushed past me, Julian shot me a triumphant smirk. His eyes glinted with provocation, a silent challenge, a declaration of victory. I stood there in the empty office, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Victoria," I said quietly, "you brought this upon yourself. Since you insist on shielding Julian, don't blame me for being merciless. After they left, I pulled out my phone and dialed Harold Peterson, the chairman of Apex Corporation, on his private line. Harold, I said, my voice smooth as silk, Alexander Ashford here. About that partnership Victoria Sterling is coming to discuss today. An hour later, I received a call from Victoria. She was furious, her voice practically a roar. Alexander, what the hell do you think you're doing? Harold Peterson not only publicly humiliated Julian, calling him a kept man who used his body to climb the ladder, he also claimed Sterling Corporation basically owes its existence to you, and that now while you're recovering, I'm running around with other men, being ungrateful and disloyal. This was all orchestrated by you, wasn't it? I chuckled softly. Victoria, I can't control other people's thoughts or mouths. Whether it's true or not, people have eyes. They can judge for themselves. Julian left completely humiliated, and the deal is off. Are you satisfied now? Satisfied. Immensely satisfied. You both reaped what you sowed. I hung up. The fire in my chest subsided slightly, replaced by a cold, steady resolve. Later that afternoon, Marcus sent me a message. News about Julian had already spread throughout the company. When he returned to the office, colleagues pointed and whispered. Some even openly cursed him for being arrogant, having devious intentions, and lacking real ability, accusing him of relying on dirty tactics to get ahead. Everything on his desk had been thrown into the trash. Even though Julian desperately insisted he wasn't that kind of person and pleaded with his co-workers to stop, no one listened to his explanations. Who would risk antagonizing the executive vice president over a mere intern? Everyone was eager to kick him while he was down. I'd seen this kind of thing countless times. Julian had truly brought this upon himself. An intern with no background and no real skills, thinking a little favor from Victoria meant he could leapfrog to the top. It was laughable. Humiliated and enraged, Julian submitted his resignation. Since he wasn't officially on board yet, his probationary period wasn't even half over. HR processed it instantly, no questions asked. Julian's situation was entirely his own doing. Who told him to be so arrogant, coveting positions and people far beyond his reach? But I knew this wasn't over. Victoria would be furious when she found out. And when she did, she would come for me. Let her come. Victoria managed to smooth things over with Apex Corporation after a lengthy effort involving multiple concessions and a significant reduction in profit margins. I had to give her credit. She was a skilled negotiator when she wanted to be. But when she returned to the office to find that Julian had already left the company, her face turned thunderous. She arrived home late that evening. I was in the nursery, putting our son Nicholas to sleep. The little guy's face was chubby and peaceful, his nose and eyes strikingly similar to Victoria's. He had my stubborn chin, though, and my tendency to frown in his sleep. I smiled despite everything, gently stroking his soft hair. Victoria stood in the nursery doorway, her expression grim. She deliberately kept her voice low, not wanting to wake Nicholas, but the anger radiating from her was palpable. Julian did nothing wrong, she said, each word clipped and sharp. He's just a hard-working young man. Now, because of you, he's not only lost his job, but his reputation is ruined, too. Alexander, there has to be a limit to your rich boy tantrums. I motioned for her to be quiet. I gently laid Nicholas down in his crib, making sure he was comfortable, then stepped out of the room and closed the door behind me. Victoria, I said, keeping my voice level, let me repeat this one more time. Julian being harassed and quitting was not orchestrated by me. Even though I told myself it didn't matter what she believed, the anger and disbelief in her eyes still sent a pang through my heart. 5 years of marriage, and she looked at me as if I were a stranger. As if I were the enemy. Ask yourself honestly, I continued. How many times have you broken your own rules for Julian? It was your tacit permission, your indulgence, that gave him inappropriate ideas. There's nothing inappropriate between Julian and me, Victoria retorted heatedly. Innocent. Would you give him things originally intended for me? Would you let him practically move into your office? I stepped closer, towering over her slightly. Don't you remember? The last secretary wasn't even allowed to bring in a temporary chair to report to you in your office. But now you repeatedly break the rules for Julian, even turning on your own husband with anger for his sake. I emphasized each word, letting them land like hammer blows. Victoria, I admit I do care about you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have married you. I wouldn't have wanted you to have my child. But you know perfectly well that Alexander Ashford doesn't tolerate even a speck of impurity in his eyes. Not the slightest hint of betrayal or deception. If you dare cross that line, even just an emotional affair, a hint of ambiguity, I wouldn't hesitate to find a new mother for my son. Victoria's face turned livid. She spun around and stormed toward the guest bedroom without another word. I watched her go, my heart heavy but my resolve firm. I understood that this particular fight was over, for now. She would retreat to the guest room, compose herself, and by the next day, we would likely reconcile and move past it. That had been our unspoken agreement, our way of managing this marriage for 5 years. However, previous conflicts had always stemmed from business or family matters. Fighting over another person, romantically, was a first. And if I had my way, it would be the last. I slept alone that night in our master bedroom, the sheets cold beside me. At some point in the early morning hours, I heard the guest bedroom door open and close. Soft footsteps in the hallway. The nursery door creaking. I knew Victoria was checking on Nicholas, as she always did when she couldn't sleep. Part of me wanted to go to her, to wrap my arms around her and pretend none of this had happened. But the larger part, the part that had built an empire from nothing, that had clawed his way to the top through sheer force of will, refused to bend. She had chosen her side. Now she had to live with the consequences. The next morning, Victoria's phone rang early. I was already awake, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of black coffee, reviewing reports on my tablet. Julian's name flashed across her phone screen. She hesitated for a moment, glancing at me, then pressed answer. Victoria, Julian's voice came through the phone, choked with sobs. I really don't know what to do anymore. Slow down. Tell me what happened. Victoria frowned, her voice instantly gentle, far gentler than she had been with me the night before. I'm being attacked online. My pictures are everywhere. Everyone is insulting me, calling me a kept man, saying I used my body to get ahead. I'm terrified. I don't even dare to leave my apartment. Julian's voice trembled with fear and helplessness, punctuated by faint, pathetic sobs. Victoria's expression turned incredibly ugly. She looked at me, her eyes practically shooting flames. Okay, first, don't panic. Stay inside. Don't go anywhere. I'll handle this right away. She hung up and slammed her phone down on the table, her eyes red-rimmed. Alexander, what exactly are you trying to pull? Julian is already gone from the company. Gone from our lives. Why do you keep targeting him? How did you become so vicious? Abusing your position, your power as my husband, as the company executive, just to hurt someone. I slammed my own coffee cup down on the table, refusing to tolerate her accusations. Victoria, I told you, I didn't do anything. The entire company knows he crossed you. Who else but you would do something like this? Huh? I laughed bitterly. Victoria, in all these years, when have you ever known me to do something and then deny it? Yet you question me again and again over some intern. It seems you're utterly infatuated with him. Victoria's face turned a shade of purple. She stormed out, slamming the door violently behind her. I calmly wiped the corner of my mouth with a napkin, watching her retreating back, a profound sense of disappointment washing over me. The fact that Julian had offended me was already common knowledge within our social and business circles. Even if I didn't explicitly order retaliation, partners eager to curry favor with me would take the initiative. I had glanced at the online situation that morning. It wasn't nearly as severe as Julian made it sound in his call, a few negative comments on his social media, nothing more. But I had to admit that his damsel in distress act had effectively triggered Victoria's protective instincts. She was acting on emotion, not logic. And that made her dangerous, to herself, to Sterling Corporation, and to everything we had built together. In the afternoon, I was scrolling through my own social media feeds when I noticed something unexpected. The flood of negative posts about Julian had vanished completely. In their place was an official statement from Sterling Corporation. I read it twice, my disbelief growing with each word. The statement declared that Julian Cross was exceptionally talented and had joined Sterling Corporation based purely on merit. It asserted that Sterling Corporation would not tolerate malicious slander against its employees and would pursue legal action against those spreading false information online. My phone screen lit up with a new message notification. It was from Marcus. Mr. Ashford, Miss Sterling didn't just have the legal department issue that statement. She also publicly announced that Julian is being reinstated effective immediately as her chief secretary. She warned that anyone caught spreading rumors or gossiping further will be terminated on the spot. Now the entire company is buzzing with rumors that Miss Sterling and Julian's relationship isn't strictly professional. Marcus's words sent a jolt through my chest. Immediately after, he sent another screenshot. It was a post from Julian's personal social media account. The storms in the workplace have passed. True gold fears no fire. My efforts have not been in vain. Thank you, Victoria, for recognizing my abilities. Moving forward, I will diligently assist Victoria and will not betray this trust. Attached was a picture of an official offer letter. He had been rehired as Sterling Corporation's chief secretary with a salary package equivalent to an executive vice president. Staring at that nauseatingly worded post, I slammed my phone down hard on the desk. Murderous rage filled my eyes. An intern, a failed intern who had already resigned in disgrace, was now earning the same as an executive vice president. And my wife had made it happen behind my back. Not long after, Victoria came home to pick up some files. She pointedly avoided even looking in my direction, walking past me as if I were furniture. She went straight upstairs, retrieved something from the study, and was about to leave when my fingers tapped rhythmically on the coffee table. "Victoria," I said, stopping her in her tracks. "What is the meaning of this?" She paused, turning to face me with cold, dead eyes. "Julian is simply a hard-working employee who was targeted by you for inexplicable reasons, forced out of the company, and then subjected to online harassment. I am merely rectifying the wrongs you committed. This is what Julian deserves. And what if I insist that you fire him? Then you can just try." Her voice was ice. "Before, it was out of respect for you, my husband, that I tolerated so much, that I allowed you to misuse your authority and harm others. Now I've had enough of your behavior. This time, I will not sacrifice Julian, and I will not let you act recklessly any longer." Victoria spun around and left. The sound of the slamming door echoed through the entire villa. In that instant, I completely lost all hope for her. Our 5-year marriage, built over time, nurtured through countless shared moments, strengthened by the birth of our son, all of it was crumbling because of a man who had shown up barely 2 weeks ago. A man with no skills, no experience, no qualifications beyond a pretty face and a talent for manipulation. I sat there on the sofa, a storm of anger and disappointment raging inside me. The water glass in my hand shattered under the pressure, shards digging into my palm. I looked down and saw blood trickling down my fingers, but I barely felt the pain. I forced myself to calm down. She had made her choice. She had drawn her line in the sand. Now she would learn what it meant to cross Alexander Ashford. Since she insisted on siding with that pretty boy, she couldn't blame me for being ruthless. "Victoria," I said to the empty room, "you will pay dearly for what you've done today." Having made my decision, I picked up my phone and called my personal lawyer, David Chen. "David, I need you to prepare divorce papers immediately. Make sure the asset division is meticulously detailed. I want everything accounted for, not a single cent unaccounted for." David, clearly taken aback by my sudden decision, cautiously confirmed, "Mr. Ashford, are you certain about this? Divorce is a significant step." "Immediately. Right now. I want that agreement ready within 3 days." "All right, I understand. And regarding Victoria, there's no need to notify her. This is my decision. My announcement." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and accessed every file related to business dealings with Sterling Corporation. Over 5 years of marriage, I had provided Sterling Corporation with substantial advantages and resources, favorable contract terms, access to Ashford Industries' overseas distribution channels, below-market loans from Ashford-backed banks. Now, it was time to take it all back. Subsequently, I issued a direct order to the Ashford Industries overseas headquarters. Inform all partners. Suspend all ongoing collaborative projects with Sterling Corporation immediately. Cite technical adjustments as the reason. "Yes, Mr. Ashford," came the crisp reply. No questions asked. absolute obedience to my command. That was always the Ashford Industries way. Next came the core technical teams that Ashford Industries had placed within Sterling Corporation. These were my people, engineers, developers, project managers who had been loaned to Sterling Corporation as part of our merger agreement. I instructed the Human Resources Department, recall all these personnel back to Ashford Industries, offering them double their current salaries. The responses came quickly. Every single one accepted. This series of actions quickly caught my father's attention. His call came soon after. "Alexander," my father said, his voice grave. "What's going on?" "I'm hearing reports of mass recalls and contract suspensions." I took a deep breath. "Dad, I've decided to divorce Victoria." There was a moment of silence on the other end. My father was not a man who expressed emotion freely, but I could hear the weight of his concern in that pause. "Have you thought this through carefully?" he finally asked. "Perfectly clear." "All right, then. I won't pry into the reasons. Your mother and I trust you, and we support your decision. Since you've made up your mind, don't waver. The Ashford family doesn't believe in dragging things out." "Thank you, Dad." Within 2 days, I had quietly withdrawn everything. Every resource. Every advantage. Every protection I had extended to Sterling Corporation over 5 years of marriage. Funds in my personal accounts were also systematically transferred to new accounts that Victoria could not access. And she remained completely oblivious to all of it. During these 2 days, Julian's social media accounts were quite active. He constantly posted photographs of himself accompanying Victoria to various business events, galas, dinners, client meetings. He showcased a new car, a new watch, a new office. The captions invariably included phrases like "grateful for Victoria's mentorship" and "blessed to learn from the best." I glanced at his posts once on the first day and then blocked him. Such garbage wasn't worth another second of my attention. Instead, I poured all my energy into preparations for my new ventures that would make Ashford Industries stronger than ever, ventures that would ensure Victoria and Sterling Corporation would never be able to touch me again. Suddenly, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Victoria's name. "Alexander," she said, her voice cold and distant. "It's Dad's birthday today. He wants us to come over to the family estate. If you don't want to come, I'll just go by myself." I glanced at the prepared divorce agreement lying on my desk. A slight smile touched my lips. "I'll be there." It was time to lay everything out on the table. To finally end this chawance. At precisely 7 o'clock in the evening, I drove my Maybach slowly through the gates of the Sterling family estate. The courtyard was brightly lit with decorative lanterns and string lights, and I could faintly hear the sounds of conversation and laughter drifting from the main house. Catering staff in white uniforms moved between parked cars, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Victoria's parents, Richard and Eleanor Sterling, along with a few relatives, were standing near the entrance to greet guests. Richard Sterling was a distinguished man in his early 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, dressed in a custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Eleanor was elegant as always, her jewelry understated but clearly expensive, her smile warm and welcoming. When they saw me get out of the car alone, a flicker of surprise crossed their faces. "Alexander, dear," Eleanor asked, tilting her head. "Where's Victoria?" It wasn't surprising they were taken aback. In 5 years of marriage, this was the first time we hadn't arrived together. Every previous family gathering, every holiday, every birthday, we had always been a unit, arriving arm in arm, presenting a united front. "She said she'd arrive shortly," I replied smoothly. "She had some last-minute business to attend to." This was not strictly true. Victoria had not mentioned anything about business when she called. But I had no interest in explaining the true state of our marriage to her parents, not yet, anyway. Richard and Eleanor welcomed me warmly inside, apparently satisfied with my explanation. The Sterling estate was as magnificent as ever. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, antique furniture that had been in Eleanor's family for generations. The butler, a man named Jeffrey who had served the Sterlings for over 30 years, personally served me a cup of high-end green tea, the leaves imported from a private plantation in Japan. I sat on the sofa in the main drawing room, accepted the cup, and sipped it calmly. I appeared perfectly at ease, engaging in polite conversation with Richard about the stock market and with Eleanor about young Nicholas's latest milestones. Inside, however, My heart was a cold, hard knot. Half an hour passed. Then 45 minutes. The other guests mingled and laughed, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. Finally, at nearly 8 o'clock, the main door opened again. Victoria had arrived. But what shocked everyone was who trailed in right behind her. Julian Cross. He was wearing another expensive suit, this one a charcoal grey with a silk tie that probably cost more than his first car. His hair was perfectly styled, his smile bright and confident. He walked so close behind Victoria that they might as well have been attached. Richard Sterling instantly recognized the inappropriateness of the situation. His face darkened, a flash of anger igniting in his eyes. "Victoria," he said, his voice tight, "this is a family gathering. What are you doing bringing an outsider here?" "Dad, Julian is my chief secretary. We just finished up some urgent business, so I brought him along with me. This is a family dinner. How can you mix it with company affairs?" Richard's voice rose sharply. "Have him leave." Julian's expression faltered. He looked toward Victoria with a wounded, puppy-dog expression that made my stomach turn. I had seen that look before. It was the same one he had used on Victoria in her office, the same one that had made her defend him against me. And it worked. Just as it always worked. "Dad, Julian is my right-hand man," Victoria said, her tone defensive. "He worked so hard today he didn't even have time for dinner. Just let him stay and eat with us." Seeing his daughter so oblivious to the situation, Richard grew even angrier. Has Alexander ever brought his assistant here during his busiest times? This is a family dinner, not one of your corporate schmoozing events. He turned to the butler. "Jeffrey, escort this gentleman out." Jeffrey hesitated, caught awkwardly in the middle of the family conflict, unsure how to proceed. He looked from Richard to Victoria to Julian, his elderly face troubled. Julian stood slightly behind Victoria. His eyes, however, kept darting toward me. A faint, provocative smirk played on his lips. This whole charade had completely exhausted my patience. "That won't be necessary," I said coldly, cutting through their argument. Every eye in the room turned to me. The murmuring stopped. Even Richard fell silent, surprised by my interjection. I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket and retrieved a thick manila envelope. I held it up for everyone to see, then placed it firmly on the coffee table in front of me. "I came today specifically for this." When they saw the large words, "Divorce Agreement," printed on the cover, the entire room fell silent. Victoria's face instantly drained of all color. The expensive purse she was holding slipped from her grasp and landed on the carpet with a soft, almost gentle thud. "Alexander," she said, her voice trembling, "you want to divorce me? Have you lost your mind?" My gaze swept slowly from Victoria's pale face to Julian's suddenly frozen smirk, then settled back on her. "I'm perfectly lucid," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Clearer now than I've ever been." Richard and Eleanor quickly stepped forward, attempting to mediate. "Alexander, dear," Eleanor said, her voice pleading, "let's talk this through calmly. If there's been a misunderstanding, we shouldn't make impulsive decisions." "There's nothing more to discuss," I replied. "My decision is final." "I won't sign," Victoria suddenly shouted, her eyes welling up with tears. "Just because I made Julian my chief secretary, you want to divorce me? Victoria, you know perfectly well what this is truly about." I stared directly into her eyes, speaking each word deliberately. "I warned you. I even gave you a chance. Alexander Ashford doesn't normally give second chances. I already broke that rule for you, but you clearly didn't appreciate it. Since you chose to trample on my dignity for the sake of some pretty boy, don't blame me for being merciless." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. I heard one of Victoria's aunts gasp. One of her cousins muttered something under his breath. Richard stood frozen, his face a mask of barely controlled fury, though whether that fury was directed at me or at his daughter, I couldn't tell. Victoria stood frozen, refusing to sign. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her jaw tight, tears streaming down her cheeks. Eleanor grabbed my arm, her voice desperate. "Alexander, please calm down. Let's talk about this slowly. Please don't do anything rash." I politely but firmly disengaged my arm. "Mrs. Sterling, I respect you deeply. You have always been kind to me, and I will always be grateful for that. But my decision is final. There's no room for negotiation. I turned back to Victoria. You can refuse to sign. In that case, we'll settle this in court. And Victoria, I let my voice drop lower, more dangerous. I promise you, you will not like how that ends. With that, I turned and strode out of the house. I did not run. I did not hurry. I walked with the slow, measured pace of a man who had nothing to fear and nothing to lose. Behind me, I heard Victoria's voice, high and breaking, "Alexander. Alexander, come back here." Then Richard's voice, sharp and commanding, "Let him go, Victoria. Let him go." I did not look back. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of gardenias from Eleanor's meticulously maintained flower beds. I walked to my car, got in, and sat there for a long moment with my hands on the steering wheel. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. But beneath the adrenaline, beneath the anger and the hurt, there was something else. Relief. Standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of my penthouse apartment later that night, gazing out over the sprawling city below, I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't experienced in a long time. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks, for months, perhaps, had finally lifted. I was free. The next morning, Marcus entered my office holding a news report. His face was barely able to hide his excitement. "Mr. Ashford," he said, "another 30 core employees from Sterling Corporation submitted their job applications to us today. To date, we've successfully recruited over 100 key technical personnel from Sterling Corporation." He continued, flipping through the pages. Sterling Corporation stock hit the lower limit at market open today. That makes it the 5th consecutive trading day of limit down. Additionally, several of their key projects have been forced to halt due to the talent drain. Market rumors are already circulating about impending bankruptcy. I nodded slightly, my expression neutral. This was all proceeding according to plan. Without the backing of Ashford Industries, stripped of its core technical team, Sterling Corporation was like a fish out of water, floundering, gasping, waiting for the inevitable. "Oh, and Mr. Ashford, there's another interesting piece of news," Marcus added, a grin spreading across his face. Apparently, Julian made some grandiose pronouncements during a Sterling Corporation senior management meeting. He proposed the company pivot entirely into the technology sector, specifically blockchain and artificial intelligence. I raised an eyebrow. Blockchain and AI. "Yes, sir. The project apparently launched and failed spectacularly almost immediately. From what I heard, Julian assured everyone that he had done his research and that success was guaranteed. He convinced Victoria to invest nearly $50 million in equipment and talent acquisition. Within 2 weeks, it became clear that he had no idea what he was doing. The technical team he assembled quit en masse, and the equipment he purchased was mostly obsolete." I sneered. A liberal arts major daring to direct technical teams. The audacity is astounding. Truly clueless. It was the predictable outcome. Julian Cross had a degree in communications with a minor in marketing. He had never written a line of code in his life. He had never managed a technical project. He had never even taken a single class in computer science. But none of that had stopped him from confidently assuring Victoria that he knew exactly how to pivot a multi-billion-dollar manufacturing company into the technology sector. And Victoria, blinded by whatever infatuation she had foolishly entrusted critical company decisions to such a person. The phone on my desk lit up. Another incoming call from Victoria. That marked the 15th missed call from her that day alone. I added her number to my block list. I had no interest in hearing her explanations or apologies. I didn't care how she was currently faring. Word had reached me that after Sterling Corporation stock continued to plummet and multiple projects ground to a halt, Victoria finally came to her senses and fired Julian. She had apparently done it personally, in front of the entire executive team, her voice cold and her face like stone. But it was too late. The damage was done. Sterling Corporation was already deeply wounded, its market capitalization nearly cut in half. In the afternoon, security called my office line. "Mr. Ashford," the guard said, sounding troubled. "Miss Victoria Sterling is in the lobby. She's demanding to see you." "I'm not seeing her. She says she refuses to leave until she speaks with you." "Then let her stand there. Assign someone to keep an eye on her. Ensure she doesn't cause a disturbance." I hung up and returned my focus to the work in front of me. There were contracts to review, acquisitions to plan, partnerships to solidify. Ashford Industries was about to enter a period of unprecedented growth, and I intended to be at the helm every step of the way. Doesn't she understand yet? I thought. It's completely over. That evening, Marcus sent a message. Victoria had stood at the company entrance for 2 hours before finally being forcibly removed by security. According to witnesses, she had not caused a scene. She had simply stood there, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the entrance doors, waiting for me to appear. I had watched from my office window on the 47th floor. From that height, she was just a tiny figure in a dark coat, barely distinguishable from the shadows on the sidewalk. I had watched her for a few minutes. Then I had turned away and gone back to work. The next day, the security call came again. But this time, the visitor was not Victoria. It was Richard Sterling. I paused for a moment, considering. Then I nodded. Tell Marcus to escort him up. Despite everything, Richard and Eleanor Sterling had always treated me decently over the years. They had welcomed me into their family without reservation. They had supported my marriage to Victoria even when others questioned the wisdom of a strategic alliance. They were good people, caught in the middle of a disaster they had not created. Richard looked haggard when he entered my office. His eyes were bloodshot, his face lined with worry. He had clearly not slept well. He was still dressed impeccably, old habits died hard, but there was a weariness to him that I had never seen before. He sat down across from me without waiting for an invitation. He got straight to the point. Alexander, he said, his voice heavy, I know Victoria made a terrible mistake, but she recognizes her error now. Can you possibly find it in your heart to give her another chance? His voice was pleading. His eyes held desperate hope, the hope of a father who would do anything to protect his daughter, even when his daughter didn't deserve it. Mr. Sterling, I said gently, I respect you greatly, but this situation is irreversible. I know she did wrong, but she truly understands her mistake now. Please, Alexander, think about the years you had together. Think about Nicholas. Doesn't he deserve to grow up with both parents under one roof? I cut him off, gently but firmly. Mr. Sterling, you understand this better than most. Some mistakes, once made, leave no path back. She's already fired Julian. She regrets everything deeply now. Firing Julian doesn't address the fundamental problem. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. Victoria didn't just disrespect me. She fundamentally betrayed the trust and affection between us. As I told her, I don't tolerate even a speck of dust in my eye. There's simply no possibility for us anymore. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. If she continues to refuse to sign the divorce agreement, I will continue applying pressure to Sterling Corporation until it collapses entirely. You know I can do it. You know I will. Richard's expression turned grim. He sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the floor. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. I understand, he said heavily. I will persuade her to sign. I will raise Nicholas. He will want for nothing. He will have the best education, the best opportunities, the best everything. The Sterling family is welcome to visit him anytime. I will not stand in the way of that. Richard nodded slowly. He stood up, walked toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Alexander, he said without turning around, I'm sorry. For all of this. I'm sorry my daughter couldn't see what she had until it was gone. Then he left. 3 days later, the signed divorce agreement arrived on my desk. I picked it up and examined Victoria's signature, sharp, angular, pressed hard into the paper as if she had been trying to push the pen through to the other side. The notary stamp was fresh, the date clearly marked. It was done. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of building something I had believed would last a lifetime. 5 years of trust, of partnership, of slowly learning to love someone I had married for convenience. All of it, reduced to a stack of papers in a manila envelope. I sat there for a long moment, holding the agreement in my hands. Part of me expected to feel something, sadness, maybe, or relief, or even regret. But all I felt was a vast, empty stillness. Like the moment after a storm passes, when the wind dies down and the rain stops and the world holds its breath. I buzzed Marcus. File the divorce papers with the court. Expedite the process. I want this finalized within 30 days. Understood, sir. And Marcus, send a copy to Victoria's lawyers. Let them know that I expect full compliance with the asset division terms. No delays. No exceptions. Yes, sir. I spent the rest of the day focusing on work. There was always work, contracts to review, meetings to attend, strategies to plan. Ashford Industries was thriving, expanding into new markets, launching new products. My team was the best in the industry, loyal and hardworking and fiercely protective of our shared success. But even as I buried myself in spreadsheets and presentations, a small part of my mind kept drifting back to Victoria, to the early days of our marriage, when we were still learning each other's rhythms and quirks, to the night Nicholas was born, when Victoria had gripped my hand so hard she left bruises, and I had whispered to her that everything would be okay, to the quiet mornings we had spent together, drinking coffee on the balcony of our penthouse, watching the sun rise over the city. It would have been easier if I hated her. But I didn't. I was angry, yes. I was hurt, disappointed, betrayed. But I didn't hate her. I pitied her. She had thrown away something real for something fake. She had traded a partner who would have moved mountains for her for a manipulative pretty boy who saw her as nothing more than a stepping stone. She had destroyed her marriage, damaged her company, and risked her relationship with her son, all for a man who had never loved her and never would. And for what? For a few weeks of excitement? For the thrill of feeling desired by someone new? I would never understand it. And I had stopped trying. Night fell. I finished processing the last document of the day and prepared to leave the office. The building was mostly empty now, the cleaning crew moving quietly through the hallways, the security guards making their rounds. As I walked out of the building, a wretched figure caught my eye. It was Julian. He was pinned between two security guards, his clothes torn, his hair a mess. His expensive suit, the one Victoria had bought him, was wrinkled and stained. His face was bruised, his lip split. He looked like he had been dragged through hell. Seeing me appear, he began struggling violently, nearly breaking free from the guard's grips. "Alexander Ashford," he screamed, his voice raw and desperate. "Everything that's happened to me is your fault. You destroyed my career. You destroyed my life." I maintained a safe distance, looking down at him with disdain. The security guards tightened their hold on his arms, but he kept straining toward me, his eyes wild with rage. "Julian," I said, my voice calm and cutting, "you seem to have misunderstood something. You were fired because you were incompetent. Those so-called brilliant strategies of yours? Just second-hand garbage copied from the internet, riddled with flaws and contradictions." Julian's face flushed red, then turned deathly pale. The anger in his eyes intensified with every word I spoke. "You managed to become Victoria's chief secretary by playing the victim, exploiting her sympathy and her loneliness. You're nothing but an incompetent pretty boy who relies on charming women to get ahead. That's your true nature." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so that only he could hear. "You bullied those beneath you. You skimmed company resources. You submitted fake expense reports and pocketed the difference. And no one dared call you out because you hid behind Victoria, abusing her trust and protection." His eyes widened. He hadn't known that I knew about the expense reports. "What do you think you amount to in my eyes?" I continued. "Just an incompetent parasite selling sob stories and probably more. Someone like you is lower than trash. You're not worth the dirt on my shoes." Julian's face turned absolutely white. I had clearly struck a nerve, every nerve, actually. He suddenly lunged forward, breaking free from the guard's grip for just a moment. "Shut up. I'm going to kill you." I didn't flinch. Before he could reach me, the guards tackled him swiftly, pinning him to the ground. One of them kneeled on his back, pressing his face into the concrete. I walked over slowly, my footsteps echoing in the empty parking garage. I placed my foot firmly on his hand, the hand that had typed those smug social media posts, the hand that had probably touched my wife in ways no man should. "Julian," I said, my voice soft and deadly, "if you ever dare to show your face in front of me again, I will make sure you die a very unpleasant death. Getting rid of you would be easier for me than crushing an ant. You had better pray that our paths never cross again." Julian completely lost it. He screamed, hysterical, thrashing against the guards. "Alexander Ashford, You'll rot in hell. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. The guards quickly clamped a hand over his mouth and dragged him away. His muffled screams echoed through the garage as they hauled him toward the exit, his feet dragging limply behind him. I watched until they disappeared from view. Then I straightened my tie, got into my car, and drove home. That same night, an anonymous account surfaced online. The account posted compromising photographs of Julian from his time working at an upscale private lounge during his university years. The photos showed him fawning obsequiously over several older wealthy women, plying them with drinks, his arm draped around their shoulders in ways that were clearly not professional. Soon after, surveillance footage of him shoplifting from a department store emerged, grabbing designer clothing and walking out without paying. Then came chat logs from his university days, detailing how he had scammed money from a girlfriend by pretending his mother was dying of cancer. The evidence was damning. It was comprehensive. And it was all completely true. I hadn't ordered any of this. I hadn't needed to. There were plenty of people eager to gain my favor, investors, partners, even competitors who wanted to stay on my good side. Those desperate for Ashford Industries' goodwill had taken the initiative themselves, digging up every piece of dirt they could find on Julian Cross. Richard Sterling also used his influence to blacklist Julian throughout the industry. A single phone call from Richard to the right people, and Julian's name was circulated to every major company in the country. He was toxic now. Unhireable. No legitimate business would touch him. Ultimately, Julian had no choice but to return to the private lounge where he had worked before, resuming his old profession. Word got back to me that less than a month later, he died from an illness brought on by excessive physical strain. His body simply gave out after years of abuse and poor decisions. I felt nothing when I heard the news. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Just the same vast, empty stillness that had settled over me after the divorce was finalized. He had made his choices. He had reaped what he sowed. As for me, within 6 months of the divorce, I secured 3 major contracts that expanded Ashford Industries into new markets across Europe and Asia. My company's stock price doubled. My career soared. Forbes named me Entrepreneur of the Year, featuring me on the cover with the headline, "The Ashford Ascendancy: How One Man Turned Betrayal into Billions." The article focused on my business acumen, my strategic vision, my ability to pivot and adapt in the face of challenges. It mentioned the divorce only in passing, a single sentence buried in the 4th paragraph. Ashford's personal life has seen upheaval as well, with his marriage to heiress Victoria Sterling ending in a high-profile divorce earlier this year. That was how the world saw it. A footnote. An afterthought. But I knew the truth. The divorce had not been a footnote. It had been a crucible, a fire that had burned away everything weak and uncertain, leaving only steel. Victoria, with her father's help, began the arduous process of rebuilding Sterling Corporation. She sold off non-core assets, renegotiated debt terms, and slowly, painfully, began to rebuild the technical teams I had recalled. It would take years, her father told me in one of our occasional conversations, but the company would survive. The sharp edge she once possessed seemed to have faded, replaced by a certain weariness. She was still beautiful, still competent, still respected in the business community. But something in her had dimmed. She moved through the world more slowly now, more carefully, as if afraid of making another mistake. I occasionally saw her mentioned in business news. An interview here, a profile there. She always looked polished and professional, but her eyes told a different story. There was a sadness in them that no amount of makeup could hide. 3 years flew by in the blink of an eye. My company was now a leader in its industry, setting standards that competitors scrambled to match. My status as a successful single CEO made me a target of interest for many women. Socialites, models, actresses, even a few minor celebrities. They showed up at galas in stunning gowns, angled for invitations to my private events, sent flirtatious messages through mutual acquaintances. But my heart remained focused on my work and on my son, Nicholas. I hadn't considered another relationship. Not seriously, anyway. There had been a few dates here and there, polite dinners, pleasant conversation, nothing more. But every time I thought about getting truly involved with someone, I remembered the pain of watching Victoria choose Julian over me. And I decided I was better off alone. Nicholas was now 4 years old. He was bright, energetic, and endlessly curious about the world around him. His smile looked remarkably like mine, crooked, slightly mischievous, with a hint of arrogance that he had inherited from both sides of the family. Since the divorce, I dedicated most of my free time to him. I personally handled kindergarten drop-offs and pickups every day, arriving in my suit and tie, chatting with the other parents while Nicholas played with his friends. I read him bedtime stories every night, doing different voices for each character. I took him to the park on weekends, pushing him on the swings and catching him at the bottom of the slide. I even set aside a small corner in my office, a corner that had once held a bar and a set of leather armchairs, and filled it with his toys and drawings. A small table at his height held crayons and paper. A bookshelf held his favorite picture books. A soft rug covered the floor, perfect for building block towers. It was his space, his sanctuary. And when he visited the office with me, he would settle into that corner and play happily for hours, occasionally running over to show me his latest drawing or to ask for a snack. "Daddy," Nicholas said one day, looking up at me with hopeful eyes, "when is Mommy coming to see me?" I checked the calendar on my phone. "Your birthday is the day after tomorrow. Mommy will likely come visit then. Probably with presents." According to the divorce agreement, Victoria was allowed to visit Nicholas twice a month for a maximum of 3 hours each visit. Over the past 3 years, she had never missed a single scheduled visit. No matter how busy she was with rebuilding Sterling Corporation, she always arrived at the agreed-upon time. She always brought carefully chosen gifts, books, toys, clothes, doing her best to make up for her past absence and mistakes. She never said anything negative about me in front of Nicholas, never tried to turn him against me. She simply spent time with him, reading to him, playing with him, being his mother. Despite my own lingering resentment toward Victoria, I never interfered with Nicholas's contact with her. I prioritized his emotional well-being above my own feelings. He deserved to have a relationship with his mother, regardless of what had happened between us. During these 3 years, Sterling Corporation had gradually recovered under Victoria's leadership. Though smaller in scale than before, about 60% of its peak size, it was operating steadily, turning a modest profit, rebuilding its reputation. Victoria had learned from her mistakes. She no longer made impulsive decisions based on emotion. She consulted with her father and other trusted advisors before committing to major initiatives. We occasionally crossed paths at business functions, charity galas, industry conferences, networking events. We would exchange polite nods from across the room, but nothing more. No conversations. No small talk. Just the acknowledgement of two people who had once been everything to each other and were now nothing at all. She was a chapter one had closed, and though I never threw away the book, I had long since stopped rereading those pages.